So the next couple months, I'm gonna go over this book.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you want to buy it on
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, it's less than $10.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll read. A little bit. The background on it is thinking about these concepts and be able to. It is recording. Thinking about these concepts and being able to make connections. I didn't really have to work at it. It came fairly naturally to me, and I thought maybe that may not come so naturally to other seekers. So
Mm-hmm.
when I didn't have time to write a book on it, and then the other day when I was looking for some books, came across this.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good that you can do a little preview in it. And
Mm-hmm.
the background on the book is someone has taken everything that Ramana has said regarding self-inquiry and all the talks and put it into a small little volume. So the,
Mm-hmm.
the, the first thing that was appealing about the book is that there's always a subject of inquiry. So you have the seeker and they're always asking a question about a certain content or a certain concept or a certain pointer or a certain thorn, if you want to call it. But the idea up front is, and I haven't had time to read the introduction, but when you're doing inquiry, the purpose, quote unquote, the only reason to do it is to get rid of some kind of misconception without replacing it with another concept. So that's like the background up front. And it's not to gain some kind of higher understanding, but but true inquiry or self-inquiry is meant to eliminate any misconception. And practically how that expresses itself is that, oh, I don't have to think about who am I anymore. That's one example. So
That was going to be my question.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I thought that was the purpose, that if we can't understand it, then it's best not to think about it.
Right. And it's if we can't understand it, if we've truly come to the point at the end of self-inquiry, there's a surrender that we won't understand it, and the concept no longer comes into our consciousness. We're no longer preoccupied by that concept. We could say that we have released or renounced that level of misunderstanding, using the word renunciation in that sense. Renunciation meaning eliminate or release something that is no longer serving us, which would be a misunderstanding or even a concept that may have been working for us for a while. If we're able to, we let that go and know it because it no longer is helpful for us. So the book has 22 chapters or 20 topics, and the first one is chapter 1 is feeling. Some of the book has questions and Ramana's answering them, and then some of them are just Ramana talking. And of course, this is translated, so there's going to be a few words here and there that may not make much sense. Or
No, go ahead.
Okay. Questioner. This is chapter 1, feeling. Can a line of thought or a series of questions induce self-hypnotism? Should it not be reduced to a single point, analyzing the unanalyzable, elementary, and vaguely perceived and elusive I? Ramana says, yes, it is really like gazing into vacancy or dazzling crystal or light. So that's the first. And then the questioner says, can the mind be fixed to that point, and how? Maharishi, if the mind is distracted, ask the question promptly. To whom do these distracting thoughts arise? That takes you back to the quote-unquote large I, point promptly. Questioner, how long can the mind stay or be kept in the heart? Maharishi, that period extends by practice. Questioner, what happens at the end of the period? Maharishi, the mind returns to the present normal state. Unity in the heart is replaced by a variety of phenomena perceived. This is called the outgoing mind. The heart-going mind is called the resting mind. Questioner, is all this process merely intellectual, or does it inhibit feeling predominantly? The latter. So it says inhibit feeling predominantly. Huh? Exhibit?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did I say?
Inhibit.
No. Exhibit feeling predominantly. Thanks. Questioner, how do all thoughts cease when the mind is in the heart? Maharishi, by force of will, with strong faith in the truth of the Master's teaching to that effect. So this is just a jumping off point to get our thinking going and ask some questions and say, well, this didn't make sense, or what does he mean by that? So in the first question, Maharishi says it's really like gazing into vacancy or a dazzling crystal or light. Now, it's interesting because you think that, well, is enlightenment just like a vacant type of understanding? And I don't think that's what he's talking about. And he also implies that, then the questioner said, well, can the mind be fixed to that point of vacancy, and how? And Maharishi says, if the mind is distracted, ask the question promptly, to whom do these distracting thoughts arise? That takes you back to the I point promptly. So that point, that concept resonates with me, is if the mind is distracted and going off, he's not saying try to bring it back. He's saying ask the question, to whom do these distracting thoughts arise? That takes you back to the I point promptly. Large I, quote unquote. So the way I would interpret the I point is that it's a impersonal experience in the moment. And to me, it implies that the mind is going to be distracted. That's the nature of it. So he is giving a pointer, and that pointer is, rather than try to bring the mind back to the present moment, he's saying ask, who's that distracting thoughts happening to? And there's a big difference. So the next question would be, well, what's the difference? What's the big difference? And why didn't he say, bring the mind back to the present moment?
Well, to me, both seem to. Well, first of all, the irony for me seems to be that Ramana Maharshi himself never had to practice any self-inquiry. So this enlightenment, or whatever that is, dawned upon him accidentally and spontaneously. Then he was moved to go to Arunachala and all the rest of it, as far as I'm aware of that story. So I'm not quite sure how no doubt he was a rare sage and with a profound understanding, but I'm not quite sure how practical those recommendations might be coming from somebody who never practiced them himself. So that's number one thing. And then secondly, when your mind distracts, and then whether you ask or moved you to ask that question, who the distraction happened to, or whether you try to bring it back, in both cases, to me, it seems to be involvement.
Seems to be what?
Isn't it? Involvement. Secondary involvement. Like, I'm distracted, and then it looks, at least it looks to me, like the me is trying to utilize something to get some gains again.
Right.
Whether by trying to bring it back or by asking to whom this distraction happened.
Right. So the second question for me is implying less doership. And it's also pointing out to that, and I think this is a very important point in seeking, is as long as there is the sense of personal doership, there's always going to be that feeling of doing something.
Also true, I guess.
So it seems like his pointings are, it's like, well, yes, this is some kind of doing, but it's the least amount of doing that someone can do. Lack of better words. When there is a witnessing of their own mind. Because the mind is so close, it seems that notionally the location is in here. And it's a much more associated, there's a much closer association than something happening externally. So when he's saying, to whom this is this happening, the point is that that inquiry would stop any type of involvement. Because then what would be the next natural reaction to the mind's being distracted? Well, who's it being distracted to? That itself, the question gives pause to the whole interaction, the whole phenomenon that's going on in that moment. And in that case, in that spirit of inquiry, when you say, well, who's that distraction happening to? If you're really looking at the sense of personal doership, and for that moment, you ask that question, there's a pause, there's a silence. And then, how do you think the mind is now being viewed? The distracting mind.
Maybe it's seen as an object.
Seen as an object, not seen as a distraction. Because the involvement puts a judgment on it. Whether it's a distraction or whether it's calm or resting.
Right.
So in this question, there's 4 things happening. There's 4 components. And this is what happens when you do self-inquiry. If you start asking yourself the question, and then something else arises out of that understanding, and then you get a deeper understanding. So the deeper understanding so far, just in the last 10 minutes that we've been talking about, is if you describe what's going on, is that there is somebody asking the question, correct? There's a mind. There's a mind that's distracted, that is off at some location other than it's supposed to be. And then there's a knowing that it should be somewhere else. So those are the 4 components of what's going on in any time, any situation. All those 4 components can happen. And what he's saying is, his pointer is, if I see that, if I do self-inquiry, and with the help of a teacher, I can see that there's 4 things going in mind. There's asking, who's this happening to? There's the mind. There's the place where it goes to. And there's an inferred place where it's supposed to come back to. And that's all happening all the time. And so when you ask yourself, except if we don't ask ourselves the question, then the other 3 things are happening. But if we ask ourselves the question, who's this happening to? Then immediately we question who's it's happening to, and then the subject-object relationship between what we thought was the person or the individual having a distracted mind starts to fall away. And now it's seen as, like we said earlier, an object. And when something is simply seen as an object in consciousness, then the judgment of this as distracting, and which is not good, falls away. And the flip side of, oh, it's good, I'm in the moment, also falls away.
When I've tried to do that in the past, the question comes up, so who's this happening to? And then there's some intellectual answer to that, and it just keeps going. So, I know there's nobody it's happening to. So-and-so said this, that's right. Okay, it's not happening to anybody. Whoa, that whole thing is a distraction. And then it keeps going round and round like that. It never comes to that moment of silence, I think.
Right. Because the line of inquiry, when you say it's not happening to anybody, there's a misconception there.
What kind of misconception?
Well, if you follow that thinking down the road, okay, it's not happening to anybody, then what is noticing that?
Oh.
By saying it's not happening to anybody, or nothing, or no one's here, that's not the conclusion or the pointer that he is pointing to for the seeker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
It's more intellectual stuff.
It's more conceptual. What he's pointing to, so here's a general rule. When you're doing self-inquiry, it should come down to some practical, experiential phenomenon. So to say that's not happening to anybody, then what happens to the person? What happens to the individual? Does the individual not register stimuli and feelings and emotions? That's not what he's pointing to. Rather, what he's pointing to is what he wants you to clearly see is the process, the four-pronged process that's happening. He's just, this inquiry leads to a description of what is, not a practice, not an answer. That's another idea that you'll know about inquiry. It's always practical. It always leads to some experiential understanding, and it leads to a description of what is. And that description of what is clear. So before, we didn't have an idea that, oh yeah, there's someone saying, asking the question, who's this happening to? There's the mind. It's going on, it's being distracted, which also implies that it's not distracted and that there's a place where there's concentration. That's all he really wants you to see.
Well, that's the conceptual framework of the seeker, basically, of the seeking process.
And that's the pointer that he wants you to see. It's if we don't even know the conceptual framework, how do we know what to work with?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So now we've done away with who's this happening to that's not happening to anybody, which is a misconception. And we're staying with this clear idea of what is happening within this four-pronged process. And now we have a little bit more clarity. Now we say, okay, if this approach to the mind is happening all the time, let's just say it's happening naturally all the time, what would that be like? Rather than saying, well, who would it be like? What would it be like in that four-pronged components? If that was seen all the time, what would happen? What would it be like? What would it be like on an experiential, practical level? That's the next question. That's a deeper level of the inquiry. This is how you get from the intellectual level to the wisdom level. So if we look at that process, and we say, all right, I'm going to look at it from the way Raman is pointing to. I'm sitting here, and the mind wanders. It goes off. And he says, ask the question, to whom do these distracting thoughts arise? And he says, that takes you back to the I point promptly. Now, he's trying to think about what is that I point that he's pointing to? So the goal in this pointer is to try to understand this I point. Because that's his answer. So what can you imagine that I point would be? Using in the context of the four-pronged process.
Well, it seems to me it can be only the background against which everything else happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a background.
But
Some
it's
kind
not
of
an object.
awareness. Some kind of awareness.
Okay, so that's not, yes, awareness. So there's awareness that the mind, let's talk about it before. When you don't have this self-inquiry, the mind gets distracted. And if you don't ask the question, the awareness or attention or focus is on what?
On distracting thoughts.
On distracting thoughts.
Right.
Now he gives you a pointer to ask the question. And the question is, to whom these thoughts happening to? Where does the focus go?
To the background, kind of, to the awareness.
Yes. So it goes to the awareness itself rather than the object of the awareness. And so now there may still be a distracting thoughts, but there's the awareness is on the awareness itself.
But Bala, how can awareness think of awareness or be aware of itself or something?
That is the first step out of pure subjectivity. Pure subjectivity is a potential of awareness. It steps outside of itself. And that's the first time awareness is aware of itself.
But not as an object, yeah? I mean, how can you be aware of something that's not an object?
As an object.
As an object.
Yes.
Okay.
So this awareness is as an object because we know it.
Yeah.
Don't jump ahead to pure subjectivity yet. We're just knowing that this is awareness.
Okay.
And awareness, we're aware of awareness. There's awareness of awareness. Or awareness is aware of itself. The more important thing is, instead of trying to put this other idea into it, let's stick with the four-pronged concepts that we talked about. If before the awareness was on the distracting thoughts,
right?
We can even say concentration or focus. Now the awareness is on the awareness itself. Do distracting thoughts still exist or go away?
It still exists for sure.
It still exists. Okay.
Yeah.
What is the relationship, you think, between the distracting thoughts and now where you are, which he calls the I point, the large I point? Does it seem closer or far away?
Does what seem closer or far away?
Distracting thoughts.
So further away.
Further away.
I would say.
What were you going to say, Dimitri?
I was going to say the opposite of that. I mean, I'm not quite sure I'm following your idea.
So these are distracting thoughts. They arise, and I'm focusing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now he's saying focus on the awareness here, not on the object. Okay, when I'm focused here, that means everything is included. Because awareness is the light that shines everything. So now here's the distracting thoughts. Before I was only knew distracting thoughts. Now I'm aware of Susan, computer, car going by, birds, dog. So where even though there's still distracting thoughts, this is not the focus of where awareness is.
Okay, yes. So in a sense, it is farther away, yes. I
So
got
in
it
that
now.
way, it noticeably seems farther away. It's in the background. Or say it's just another part of consciousness. So we don't even have to say it's farther away or closer. It's just, it's another happening within consciousness. So I have the car, distracting thoughts, dog, Susan, car going by, bird chirping, distracting thoughts, car. And that's the awareness that he is pointing to. But what we tend to do is, distracting thoughts. I shouldn't have those. I need to be more focused. That's the involvement. that we talk.
Right.
That's the secondary involvement. And then for some reason, I don't know what, we want to get the distracting thoughts away. But the nature of the mind is to have distracting thoughts. This is never going to stop. Distracting thoughts will never stop. And the controlling way is like, oh, here they are. I got to make sure that I push them down out of my consciousness. And notice the language, out of my consciousness. And then they come back up, and then I go, oh, there they are again. I guess I haven't been doing well practicing, or there's some kind of understanding. I am going to push them down out of my awareness. Which brings me to the fourth point, is that when there's simply awareness, it's seen as awareness not belonging to any particular person. And that's why it's impersonal. And that's why there's not a sense of personal doership or claiming me in asking this question.
Wow.
Because the awareness is just seen as awareness, not belonging to any particular person. But that's not the same as nobody. Now, in Atma Bodha, Shankaracharya talks about the same concept, but in a different way. He says if you go, let's put it a modern updated version of it, but he called it a dance hall light. But if you go to a discotheque, and there's a lot of people there, and there's that ball that shines around, and maybe just let's keep it as a white light right now, but it's making all this, light around. And then it's time to close. People go and leave, and you come back into the hall with everybody gone and see the light. And that light is awareness. It's always there, whether we are aware of it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's calling the I point.
Mm.
So there's sometimes when we go about our business and we're not even thinking about these concepts. There's no involvement. There's no thinking about awareness is aware of itself. And then we come back into the empty disco, and it's like, oh, there's awareness again. I remember when there used to be a lot of people here and used to be noise, and we'll call that distraction.
But it's still, all of this is applicable to the waking state only, right?
Yes.
So if there is no waking state, there's no revolving light, no disco tag, nothing. No I, basically, no awareness, right?
No, there is, and he talks about that in another chapter. But real briefly, now what he says, now we're going even deeper into this line of thought. So now we're questioning the component that we should be questioning, or not should, but the most beneficial is that what is this awareness?
Mm-hmm.
And so like as a pointer, he's going to state right off the bat that this awareness is the same awareness that exists in all three states of consciousness. So if you look at your question was, if the waker is not there, the awareness goes away. How can the awareness be there if the waker's not there? And what it's showing, right? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's that showing is from the standpoint of this waker, the waker thinks everything depends on it. So your question is implying that the waker is really implying that if it's not for me, awareness won't be there. And it's the other way around. Awareness, this waker doesn't have any independent existence.
And I'm sorry, just to clarify, by the waker, you mean the body mind, the perceiving body mind, or the waking state?
Both.
The waker is a sense of personal doership, right?
Well, it's not just the sense of personal doership, but it's feelings and thoughts and actions and meeting people and the sun rising and everything that's happening in the waking state.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that what he's saying is when you withdraw the waking state and go to the state, awareness is still there. Awareness is the light that's illuminating the dream state.
Yeah. Since there is some kind of awareness in a dream, absolutely.
Right. Now we withdraw the dream state into the deep sleep state, and now awareness is shining a light or is illuminating the absence of the waking or dream state.
I follow you, but that remains a concept for me.
Yeah, really.
I mean, it's not experiential for me.
No, for sure.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go now, which I really regret. Bala, I know you're recording this. Is it possible to send me the recording of the rest of it? Yeah. Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah. Okay, I'm really sorry to leave, but I have to go. So I'll see you next time, everybody.
Yes. Bye, Alan.
Bye, Alan.
Bye-bye. Namaste.
Namaste.
So the point now, though, is it's important to understand is now you moved from this one concept, one line of inquiry that he has it's one chapter on, and now you're going into another line of inquiry. So just to be clear, now you're talking about out of the 22 chapters, this is another chapter that he's focusing on. But and we can certainly talk about that, but I wanted to have a clear distinction that this concept of this awareness being present through all three states of consciousness is another line of inquiry.
Okay. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Well, I don't know if you're jumping ahead, but I just wanted to point out that this is another line of inquiry.
Okay.
Because I think what he's done is he's probably saying that there's 22 contents or objects of inquiry, and that's probably about it. So if we started with number 1, which was feelings, now we just go to number 15, which is the I, which is there throughout the 3 states of consciousness. But before we go there, we can say, all right, that's hard to grasp. All right, I understand that. But let's work in just the waking state. So before we start the 3 states of consciousness, you can probably feel a little more at the heart level that there was some kind of awareness that's always been with Dimitri as a boy, as a teenager, as a young adult, and now.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, so that's the starting point.
Okay, and what's next?
Well, I'm a little hesitant to jump ahead here.
Okay.
But we can. But let's see with the feeling if there's anything else that's so we can finish this one line of thought. So he says the mind returns to the present normal state. Unity in the heart is replaced by variety of phenomenon perceived. This is called the outgoing mind. So then he says the heart-going mind is called the resting mind. So when the four components are seen and you question the awareness itself, that is the resting place. When you see that the resting place is where awareness includes, there's an understanding that awareness is all inclusive of everything that's happening in the moment. Resting place or heart, or in the heart, is when you hear the lawnmower in the back, the birds, the car, Susan, the dog, distracting thoughts. That's resting place. But people think that, misunderstand and think the resting place is when there's no distracting thoughts. It's a slight but very significant difference. Resting place means this: distracting thoughts, and everything's inclusive in this phenomenon that's happening right now. And whether resting thoughts or distracting thoughts, resting or distracting, that's not important. That's not the focus. The focus is, or the awareness is, that everything's happening, including whether distracting thoughts or resting thoughts.
And this resting mind, so to speak, or heart-oriented mind, can include something stupid you do, and then you're regretting that stuff, and it includes everything basically, right?
Yeah. That's
okay.
It.
Yeah.
That's this.
That's something stupid you do also.
Right. Yeah. Everything in this, because the mind. Now we have to include everything with this too. That this is not going to change. It's not going to get bigger. It's not going to get smaller. It's not going to get any. The quality's not going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that it's going to happen is through this line of inquiry that we're going to see. We're going to include more into the present moment.
Okay, got it. Yes.
And so what he is calling that is the resting mind. And so there is some kind of unitive understanding, not in the sense of oneness, I'm one with everything, but more the unitive understanding is more what I would say an inclusive understanding. The inclusive, that everything is included in any particular moment, including, oh, this was stupid, I did something stupid, I could have done something better, or including that I shouldn't even have this, or including I'm not seeing the all-inclusiveness, I'm only seeing this. Now, whether you're seeing it or not is not dependent on the presence of awareness. Awareness is there whether you're seeing it or not. That's another point that he's trying to make. So even though you say, I don't see it, okay, you don't see it, but awareness is there. Awareness is not dependent on whether you see it or not.
That makes sense, yes.
Mm-hmm. So to me, this is a very simple sadhana, simple practice, in that all that's happening is through this line of inquiry, you're asking, how much do I actually perceive or aware of what's going on in any given moment? Because if I'm only focused on, oh, I should have done something better, or that was stupid, what about the other things that are happening in the moment? And we've lost touch of what is illuminating those thoughts. Because he does say earlier, To whom do these distracting thoughts arise? Now at the end, it makes sense where he says, when the questioner says, how do you always see thoughts cease? When the mind is in the heart, he says, by force of will, with strong faith in the truth of the Master's teaching to that effect. My guess is that by force of will, I'm a little sketchy on that translation, but I would imagine he's saying, if you continue to see this consistently, focus, have faith in what's being said by the teacher, by the book, by other previous teachers' experience.
Well, he probably means what Nisargadatta would call earnestness or something.
Earnestness, yes. Yeah.
Like desire to know, desire to find out, or whatever that is.
That's all. That's perfect. I desire to find out. I just want to know. I want to know this experience. I really would like to know this experience where the distracting thoughts are there, and everything. There's also awareness of other things around. I just want to know. I really want to know. And so it does. It's totally different than trying to wash this mind, which is eventually going to come up. So yes, it's the earnestness. I just want to know, what is this experience that they're talking about? What's this like? And everything else is also there. And this is seen as one object in consciousness. I want to know. And earnestness.
And if I may ask something related to just this, I would understand this practice. I mean, I could picture it like sitting myself, being seated on a couch or something, and then kind of trying to watch what's going on, whether there's distracting thoughts or awareness and so forth. But when I'm in my office, for instance, working, and my work requires concentration, deep focus, because this is interpretation, and sometimes some Russian speak is messy and difficult to understand, and you have to really to focus on what is it he wants. And how is that viewed in the context of what we've just said?
So it's what I said earlier, is that the liberating idea here is that this doesn't always need to be practiced, number one, because we aren't thinking about these ideas all the time. We are at work. And when we're at work, we need that focus, that concentration on the activity at hand. That's number one. Number two, now you know that, well, awareness is there, even though you're not focused or aware of awareness while you're concentrating at work. Don't worry, awareness is there. You're not going to lose it. It's still there.
That's comforting already.
Yes. You're a fish in the ocean. Don't worry. You're not going to get away from the water.
But still this, what do I say that? I view it as an experiment of sorts. Exploration. What is this? What is this awareness? What is this distracting thought? How does it work? And then, at least at present, it kind of divides my life into two parts, which is not right according to my basic view. I mean, the life stream should be like one undivided flow of life, right? Including everything, like good, bad, pleasant, unpleasant, and so forth. But for me now, there is my kind of spiritual interest. It talks with you, all those books and concepts and what is this awareness and all that stuff. And then I go to my office, and then I have to be very practical there. Very practical, focused, very specific, and the more specific I am, the best I will do that. And how to reconcile this? How do I reconcile all that? How do I be in my office, doing a lousy job, dealing with ugly people, occasionally, quite often, and still be centered, or whatever that is, be in the heart, be aware of what else is going on at the same time.
So I already gave you the answer. I'm just going to repeat myself. It's you're a fish in the water, and you're saying there's times where I don't notice I'm in the water, and there's times when I do notice I'm in the water. How can I try to get rid of this dichotomy? And the answer is, what dichotomy? You're in the water all the time. You're in awareness all the time, whether you are aware of it or not. And it goes back to, again, awareness is what you really are. It does not depend on whether Dimitri's aware of it or not. So what we've exposed is this subtle claiming part of Dimitri that wants to be aware of the awareness all the time. And that's an impossibility. It's not practical. So it goes back to the question, practical. And it's also not reality. The reality is, which was the second part, reality is you are in awareness. Awareness is there all the time.
Yes, I can see that. I can see that.
So in your question, don't you think there's an implied that being aware of awareness is better than being focused at work at this crappy job? There's a qualitative difference.
Well, that was an initial assumption, kind of.
Yes.
I would say.
And there is no qualitative difference.
Because when you see Ramana, all those documentaries of footage with Ramana sitting, like gazing at people, or if you go to see Wayne and see him like gazing around, that's a very nice, sweet feeling, actually. And you think you are tempted to think, oh, that's what it is. That's how it should be for me all the time.
Yeah.
If I grasp this really firmly, if I get this, that's how it's going to be for me all the time. That's the underlying assumption.
Yes. And that's a misconception.
You've just told me that, yeah. So, obviously then, for you also, there are moments when you are completely involved into something without being aware of anything else.
Yes.
Something pleasant or unpleasant, doesn't matter.
Yes.
And then you kind of go back to it. Oh, I'm like, there's awareness, birds chirping, or
yes, exactly.
Sun's shining, and okay.
Now, perhaps if I didn't have to work, maybe I'm sitting around all day and being in that awareness because there's nothing else demanding the working mind.
Yeah. That's where that working mind concept is useful.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And just reminds me, the latest satsang we had a week ago, I believe it was, when I asked you something like, well, so there is no formless Brahman except for as a concept, and you said yes.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I surprisingly felt light the rest of the day, somehow. I don't know. It was really, I could explain it first, that to myself, like, I'm going to feel, I got to feel good today.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seems what you described about yourself too, like when some misunderstanding was removed. And again, I'm not sure if that misunderstanding of mine was completely removed or not, but the rest of the day, it felt pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, wow, I feel light.
Yes. So that's why Swami Ramatirtha says that these misconceptions or concepts are like gold on a donkey's back. They seem like they're valuable. Oh, it's like I got a concept, but it's really, even though it seems like gold, it's weighing the seeker down. And so when you said lightness, there is a lightness because you're throwing out this gold that's can wear down the body mind mechanism. So the indication that you've got something today is that if you were at work and you were totally involved in work for about an hour, hour and a half, and you come out of it and you say, oh, you know what? I'm in this work and I've just been focusing and now, and there was no awareness of awareness. Now you would say, oh, that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. And you go back to work and there'd be a lightness.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come out again of another 45 minutes. You go, oh, then perhaps you might, now that you don't have that thought, oh, I missed awareness, you might say, well, there's no thought now to have that, create that involvement. And you come out of your work and you go, oh, wait a minute, look at all that's happening right now. And that would feel light. And then you go back into your work and then you come out and it's like, oh yeah, look what's happening. That was a tough job. That I didn't like the guy, there was a tough translation, whatever, and that's this. But look what else is going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so he's saying that if there's an earnestness and strong faith that you believe this and you want to have this experience of what's being described, then you'll keep going back to it and you'll keep going back to it and keep going back to it.
Well, we'll see what happens. I have to work today as well.
It's a great opportunity. Like, wow, I can't wait to go to work and practice.
Yeah, in a way, I agree.
Yes, yeah. All righty. Okay. Any other question before we go?
Well, there are always questions, but again, I'm not sure there are answers for those questions. Well, for instance, just, again, it is just kind of a silly question in a way, but what makes your heart beat and what makes your breathing happen? So that life energy, so to speak, which is behind all this, which manifests itself as your heart beating,
Mm-hmm.
Is it that absolute, or is it that formless Brahman manifesting itself through this, or is it something else?
Yes, it's actually a question that is asked by a student in the Upanishad, is what is making the breath happen? What is making the ear hear? What is it making the eye see? So that's another line of inquiry.
And I'm afraid there is no answer to that.
No, there is.
Not...
But you'll see that it's a variation on what we talked about today. So the way the teacher gives the answer, and that's why if you get this one line of inquiry, then the others start to make sense, and that's how you start to make a nice connection. But the answer is, it's not what I see, but that which makes me see. It's not what I breathe, but that which makes me breathe. Again, it's the same idea of getting away from this idea that I am breathing, but there's something.
Okay. Okay.
So if you use what we did today, the other line of inquiries will also become clear. So with this book, and there's 22 line of inquiries, all you need is to get one and take it to the end, and the other one's clear. Much like we talked about in Satsang in LA, about once you know one distance, you know the others. But intuitively, I feel that you knew that these ideas were connected. The breath, what's making the breath, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that book that you introduced today, where is it available? On your website or?
Amazon.
Oh, Amazon?
Yeah.
So once again, it says
it's purple.
How to practice?
Yeah.
How to practice self-inquiry. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, just write down quickly. Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you.
So the plan at the moment is to go to chapter 2 next week, and it may be a little bit longer, so maybe not finished. But chapter 2 is consciousness as awareness.
Okay. So there should be. I'm assuming then we should have another satsang next Saturday.
I'm sorry.
So then there should be another satsang next Saturday.
Yes. And we'll go.
This is kind of fun.
Yeah, and we'll do chapter 2 and just keep going on. And the first question was about the 3 states of consciousness, and I am, and witness, and so yeah.
Okay, so we have work to do then.
Yes. We get to experiment, have fun, and look forward to experimenting and seeing. Let me see what needs to be revealed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Namaste.
Namaste, Dimitri.
Namaste.